the worst possible situation, which was being pressed against the MRI and then having an item magnetized into your chest.
Mac, you are so afraid of getting Final Destinationed. Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Hacker Slash. If you're joining us again, welcome back. I folded your clothes for you. If this is your first time listening, welcome to the party. We are a horror movie review podcast dedicated to telling you whether a movie is a hack,
a total joke, a waste of time,
or a slash.
Totally killer, pun intended.
We believe horror is for everyone, and as such, we're rating these movies with a perspective we've gained from our varying walks of life and the flavors of fear we fancy most. My name is Chris, I'm your fellow neighborhood slash enthusiast. This week I'm joined by the Superfly Space Guy Mac.
Okay, so now you're going to call Han Solo a liar?
And the classic horror connoisseur, Sean.
It sucks the biggest mega balls in the history of shitty ball suckery.
This week we're exploring the 2019 sequel of a film that gave us a horror spin on Groundhog's Day.
And if you support the show, you'll also get to hear our B-side at the end of this episode where we get into the zany idea of time travel and, oddly enough, some Groundhog Day shenanigans.
In 2017, Blumhouse introduced audiences to Tree Gelbman, a college student stuck reliving the same deadly day over and over again. 2 years later, her story picked up right where it left off. Only this time, the loop was just the beginning. This sequel, much like its predecessor, isn't shy about its influences. While the first film nodded to Groundhog Day, this one adopts a sci-fi bend and tips its hat to Back to the Future Part 2, as it explores the origin of Tree's time loop and the implications it has for her dimension. This week, we're talking about Happy Death Day to You. Who's seen this one before?
Oddly enough, despite having a pretty good time with the first one, from what I can remember, I had not seen this one before.
I was so excited for this after we watched the first one that I held off and saved it, knowing that we were going to cover it. And that was maybe just a lot of faith, but I knew we were going to get there, and I was just setting it aside for that special moment.
We made it.
That is wild. I can't believe neither of you have seen this.
Yeah, I know. Crazy.
I saw this back when it came out, and I remember this being such a fun time. I hadn't yet fallen prey to, I think, a lot of the emotions that I have fallen prey to in my 30s, but this one was a really lovable, easy peasy time. I think about Happy Death Day in the first place. That one was just so fucking funny.
Right?
And there was a lot of it that wove in maybe some like deeper sentimental stuff, but it struck a really nice balance. So I remember going into this one thinking, okay, we're probably going to get more of that, but probably a little bit more sci-fi.
I had no expectations for anything having to do with the time travel. I just figured I don't care, and I'm just here for another loop. And the tone of the first film and the comedy that you mentioned, I just thought it was going to be fun because the first one was so much fun.
Yeah, I got to be honest, I didn't remember much about the first one when I first went back into this film, so I kind of had to like recap a little bit in my head. And I probably should have watched the first one before going back into this one, and not for nothing, but I do think that is exactly what everyone should probably do before watching this one, because after watching this movie, I feel like it would be like the perfect back-to-back film. You'll probably know what I mean if you end up watching this movie, but either way, if you didn't happen to watch the first one or don't plan to before watching this one or rewatching it before watching this one, you'll probably be thankful for the previously on Happy Death Day segment that we do get in this movie. So there is that.
The previously on Happy Death Day was just so fucking good. And that's what you missed on Glee.
Right? Exactly. It actually worked out. I was so surprised about it. I was like, oh, what a nice surprise.
Yeah, I forgot that moment was in the movie because I was thinking, just to your point, Sean, damn, I started this movie. Should I have put on Happy Death Day first? Because I really loved that one. And Tree Gelbman is such a fun final girl. So to see more of her is a really great time. And I thought, okay, maybe I should have just made a whole day of this. But it's actually, I would say, unnecessary. You should have seen it at least once, but I don't think you have to do it back to back. Because let me tell you this, watching this movie and having the space to experience it on its own, I just had so much joy. I had so much laughter. But holy shit, I also had so much uncontrollable sobbing. This movie got me twice. And I'm wondering now if that's why I have this nasty, persistent headache that will not go away.
Oh, no. Not the emotional headache.
Oh, yeah.
Sobbing will do that to you. I think it feels like they leaned heavier into that this time than they did in the first movie. Or maybe it's just the way that they did it kind of struck more and was more effective, but it definitely hit those points really strongly. I think they had a lot of fun here. And so I'm watching it. I'm staying with it. We're talking about timey-wimey kind of stuff. That's a Doctor Who reference for those of you into time travel. It's interesting watching the first one, watching this one. How much later is it than the last time we covered it? It's not that you have to remember all the details, but I think the feeling of it sticks with you, of this type of movie where it's not too somber. It's not too dark. It's kind of silly. They can do some pretty gnarly stuff on the screen. And in those moments, you're not even worried about it because the rest of the film is so interesting. So I think they really had a good balance.
Yeah, I think this movie definitely feels a little bit different than the first one. I feel like the first one, looking back on it, maybe felt like it was more just like not taking itself as serious, just having a good time. Whereas this one really hit on some emotional levels as well and got a little bit more complex with the story. But between the both of them, and definitely watching this one of the earliest feelings or thoughts I had was, and it came right back to me again from when I even watched the first film, is the fact that there are all these like super distinctive moments that happen throughout this otherwise random ass fucking day that keeps looping, right? Like obviously it's her birthday and things like that in the first one, but like, man, I'm just thinking of my day to day, and nothing like this happens in my normal day to day. Like I don't see these distinctive moments of people popping out at me or specific, but maybe you just don't notice them. But that's one of the first things that popped in my head on watching these opening scenes.
Well, 100% you just don't notice them. Even in the first movie, she barely notices some of the stuff that even happens. And then, yeah, the more the movie cycles on, the more it starts becoming predictable. And oh my gosh, now I'm just thinking, if I were stuck in this loop, there are a couple people I can think of that I run into just about every day at work who have these catchphrases. And if I had to loop with those catchphrases, ooh, that'd be rough.
Is one of them living the dream?
Yeah. Actually, you know what? One of them is.
That's always terrible. That's always one of them. How you doing today, man? Living the dream, bruh.
Okay, but looking back into this movie, a couple things really stood out to me. One, they went further than Happy Death Day. And when you have the balls to go as deep as you do on some of the logistics behind this loop, you play a very dangerous game. It can be overwhelming. It can go right over your head. It could be so poorly explained that your typical time paradox nerd would be like, oh, that's absolutely not right. So I think you have to walk a very fine line here. But I think they handled it well. I think they went just far enough into giving some jargon without making it feel like it was just running the whole movie. One thing that also did surprise me, though, Dre is played by the same woman from the 2022 Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Holy shit.
And I saw this movie before I saw that one. And man,
what?
I didn't like her in that one. I didn't like her character. She played the character exactly as it was supposed to be played, but holy shit.
Damn, I did not connect those dots. I gotta say, though, I was not expecting this movie to play so heavily into those time loops. You know what I mean? Like, I was not expecting this movie to go that complex with the story the way that it did and how it tied directly into the first one as well as it did. I think that was one of the more surprising aspects. I was kind of sitting in just remembering this kind of silly, fun time from watching the first one and thinking I was going to get the exact same vibe from this movie. And in a lot of ways, I did get that vibes, but in a lot of ways, it required a lot more attention to detail that I didn't feel like I needed in the first one. And I think that maybe the disappointing thing about that is that it took away from the horror aspect of the film and leaned further into the sci-fi theme. So just depending on, you know, what your vibe is at the time, what you're really in the mood for, what you're looking for, you know, just know that maybe some of those horror slasher feels got stripped away a little bit.
That might be fair. The sci-fi stuff is fun. They did go further into it. I don't know that they needed to necessarily, and I'm the sci-fi kind of person here. But the thing that caught me off guard was like they were able to expand the cast, or at least who we focused on in the cast, without it being jarring. And so we were able to like add new players here, go down these other stories with them, but we didn't take away from the main story and from our main character in any way. And so it made things really interesting. When we get to the spoiler zone, there's like one thing that I want to discuss that I thought was a plot hole, and maybe you all can correct me. But the rest of it, though, I think it made it fun to have these other people in play and to have these other characters also living miniature versions of the first movie, which was really interesting as well. Like the first couple minutes of this film, you're like, okay, we're going to do this again, but we've got a different face. No, it's just a little taste. It's a little reminder of what we went through.
For sure. And to your point, John, you talk about how maybe some of this strips away the horror and leans more into sci-fi. But the biggest thing that this movie has to do is just remain fun. So when you walk into Happy Death Day, I don't think there was really anything, barring one moment in the original Happy Death Day film, that had the creepy slasher atmosphere. I'm thinking about one scene where she's stalked by the killer under the bridge. Anything else was more funny than anything.
Yeah.
And when you look at this movie, it has enough of the slasher in it to still tick the box for me. It feels very horror comedy. And now with the added element of horror sci-fi comedy, I think it does pretty well to just play into its own genre. But of course, this is something that's very safe for you to watch if you're among friends who can't really deal with horror movies.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's not a scary film by any means. Maybe for a teeny bopper or something like that, but definitely not for the average viewer. I think there is little here that will visually scare you. Definitely not enough jump scare tactics to really get you from that angle either. I think, in fact, I think the most frightening thing about this movie was the thought of having to do so much math.
Totally agreed. Hate math.
Right?
Math is probably one of my worst subjects. Took me out of computer science because I didn't realize how much math there was in there. But math is also not fun. And this movie was.
When I think about how many different versions of myself I could have been had I not been so bad at math.
Could have been an astronaut.
A lot of career changes before I even graduated high school. My dreams stopped being dreams because of math.
Parents, get your kids into math ASAP.
It's the whole, when am I ever going to need this shit when you're in school? And then, as it turns out, folks, you do need math sometimes. It helps.
But you're right that it's not a scary movie, and I give it credit for that because it's in the horror genre. It is a slasher, but it doesn't hurt to watch. You know, I think we went through superhero movies being really gray and dull and boring and actiony and serious for a long time. And then they remembered, oh yeah, superheroes are comic book characters. Typically, we should probably have a little fun with this. They should have a little fun. And so I love that in this one here, the characters start having fun with the loops, and the story shows us, you know, some interesting emotional things, but in reality, that sense of fun never goes away. We have some horrible deaths that you're going to talk about too. They're really gnarly, but some of those moments were actually the lightest of the film in a way. And so it's interesting how they were able to kind of go back and forth here. But yeah, you do take away from any kind of fear you might have for the characters, you know, or for yourself, of course, in that way.
Okay. And realistically here, think about what you just said, Mac. The deaths in this movie are gnarly, but they are some of the lightest moments in the movie.
Yeah.
How the fuck do you manage that?
It does.
And listen, this movie is very much an echo of its predecessor. When you look at these two movies together, you're not going to feel there's a lot different. It's really just a good expansion. So in terms of being a sequel, it's not like they reinvent the wheel, so to speak, but they continue the story in a really fun way. And this movie does, you know, owe a lot to its predecessors in terms of the movies of time travel and other dimensions that came before it. I mentioned up at the top half of the episode, Back to the Future 2. You get that movie as well. So this isn't going to be the freshest, most original thing you're ever going to see, but it is a fun application in the horror genre.
Yeah, I think that's it right there. I think that this movie does a pretty good job unraveling its story throughout its like murky and convoluted timeline. I think It's definitely different maybe in its approach to its own story. I think it definitely draws strength from those time loop ideas that we got from movies like Groundhog Day, and to your point, Chris, the time travel concepts that were popularized by movies like Back to the Future, whether it be 1, 2, or whatever.
Time travel stuff has been around for a while, whether it's in sci-fi, in horror, in dramas. You mentioned the fact that this relates to a lot of other properties, but I think what it does is treat them as established canon to build upon. And so I think anytime you're getting into time travel now, you just have to assume the viewer is probably familiar with at least some of the basics, and you can't just make it up all again. Sure, it's fun to come up with a mechanism for how it happens, but don't dwell on it too much, because that people are going to nitpick it, to be honest. And that's boring to sit down with somebody who tears apart the mechanics of time travel, because none of it's real. So it's more interesting, I think, to just move on with the story, keep things going, do fun stuff with those mechanics. But yeah, it feels like the first one. It feels like a good expansion, not like that weird Scrubs thing they tried to do, bringing it back after the series ended. It just feels like, no, they made another season. It's good.
I will say, though, I think I had more fun getting to the end of this movie than I actually had with the ending of the movie itself. Not that the ending is bad. I think the ending was fine. It's pretty much what you would expect to happen, I would say. I think everything kind of falls into place one way or another, not too surprising. I think that the film definitely leaves some loopholes open for a potential expansion in this universe, but we'll see if we ever get one.
Yeah, man, this movie just has a nice, clean, wholesome ending, and I'm not mad at it. It felt like a safe landing after the turbulent emotions that you feel throughout the whole experience. You're laughing 1 minute, sobbing the next. And again, I'm not saying that everyone's going to sob watching this movie. I am saying that if you're a little tender, and if you have had recent loss in your family, maybe this is one of those things that's going to be cathartic for you. And it's going to bring up some emotions that you want to process or reflect on some more. I thought the ending was safe. I thought it was fun. It is disappointing that when this movie released, it didn't make as much financially as they would have liked. So while Christopher Landon has had plans for a third film, it was on the books, then off the books again, and then was recently confirmed in 2023 to be in the process of being pitched to studios. So we'll see if it ever comes to light. I personally would love to see more Tree Gelbman.
Yeah, I think the ending here is good. It's weird, though, because, Sean, you mentioned it, the buildup is a lot of fun. Getting there is a lot of fun. When we make it to the actual ending, I felt kind of torn, because I felt like this is cool, this is fun, this is good for our characters, but it also feels like the type of ending you see before you don't see any more. Like there's not going to be a sequel. It feels like we needed to kind of wrap up that leaves things open, but also we know there's a risk that no more is going to come from this. And that, to me, was kind of a bummer, because I guess it matches reality, which is unfortunate. So I hope we do get more, because the concept is fun. These characters are great. The writing is a lot of fun. You could really do a lot from here. But if they choose not to go any further, it's a little bittersweet.
Well, we'll see how all this commentary shapes up into some scores. But before we actually rate this movie, Sean, how would you describe the gore score?
Well, for a title like Happy Death Day, I'm sorry to disappoint all you gore lovers out there, but this one doesn't have much of any gore, despite all the deaths that we get in this movie. So it's actually pretty impressive, the lack of gore, when looking at how many deaths we have in this movie. So it's got to earn something, but it's not earning anything higher than a very low gore score.
It's the Blumhouse special. And what about the Animal Report?
Look, it's all good in the hood.
Let's go ahead and get into our ratings then. Happy Death Day to You from 2019. Was it a hack or a slash?
This one was just more fun, and I'm here for that. You know, I've mentioned in the past that I like this newer style of film that's got a lot of comedy, that feels really polished, that has, I don't know, just characters that you can not necessarily care about too much, but also not hate looking at for an hour and a half. And there's something to be said about Blumhouse doing all the work that they've been doing, making this kind of film. They've had some other stuff that, you know, doesn't hit for me. But there's other films I think about, you know, we've talked about in the past, like Freaky was a lot of fun. Obviously, the first installment of this franchise was a good time as well. There's other time travel movies recently that have come out on Netflix that have been interesting. But I don't know what it is about the 2020s, but we can make a good, well-written, polished horror comedy that doesn't take too long to get through and doesn't suck the joy out of everything. I'm impressed every time I meet one of these. You know, I think babysitters aren't the only ones that can have some good horror fun here, and I appreciate it for that. The characters here, we expanded on the cast in terms of who we're going to be focusing on, and I found that enjoyable. And I think the emotions that we get into, they're worth it. It could be a lot for some, but I think by the end of it, you feel like you've earned something. For all of that, I'm going to say it's a slash.
I'm going to go ahead and jump in here because I'm absolutely kicking myself. At the very beginning of this recording session, folks, we sat here and connected during our B-side discussion about all this time travel property that we see out in media. We talked about video games, TV shows. Mac went on about Star Trek. We talked about some movies. And I completely fucking forgot about the glory that was Totally Killer.
I know. I was just thinking that as he was mentioning it.
Holy shit. How terrible. But listen, Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day to You walked so Totally Killer could run and have its day. This movie is fun. This movie is wholesome. This movie is the perfect amount of safe ground that you need to set to be able to bond with your friends who don't like horror movies, but they are willing to give a little something a shot. This is one of those really special movies where it's equal parts hilarious and equal parts cathartic. And you can dig as deep as you need to find something more substantial there. This movie has the Blumhouse polish. Tree Gelbman is a final girl for the decade, and it's nothing more than a slash.
I can definitely talk about some of the things that I didn't like about this movie. I don't think most of the acting, despite one character, is super great in this movie. I think this movie in some ways lacked a certain severity that I would have liked to see. But I think that the good outweighed the bad in this one. I honestly do. It's a fun movie. We're all talking about it. I really enjoyed the way this movie picked up the torch from where the first movie left off and really just twisted us through a time-bending tale of some good sci-fi horror fun. Honestly, it has that teenage slasher feel to it. It has this time-traveling sci-fi vibe as well. It's pretty lighthearted, but still finds a way to hook you into some, into that same story, but bringing us like maybe deeper into that story and really proving that there was more to tell, right? Proving that there was a little bit more to tell here. And it's not just one of those sequels that's trying to ride the coattails of its predecessor, like we see in so many horror sequels. The sequel hops dimensions and really plays like a mad scientist with its own timeline. That's the best way I can really put it. It's just a fun movie with an interesting story. It gives nods to some of my childhood favorites we've been talking about, like Back to the Future. And I don't want to steer you wrong, right? Like, we're really hyping this movie right now. It has flaws. This movie is not perfect, but it's definitely worth a watch. It's fun. It's lighthearted, especially if you liked the first one. So this one's a slash no matter what alternate universe you might be in.
Well, with that, Happy Death Day to You has earned a universal slash, but there's a lot more to talk about when we return from our break. So if you've already seen it before, please let us know what you would rate it by joining the conversation in our Discord server. You can find that link in our show notes. But if you haven't seen it yet, you can also follow the other link in our show notes to see where you can find it streaming right now. When we return from our break, we'll dive deeper into the spoiler zone territory, unpack some of what those flaws were, and then try to figure out what this plot hole Mac was mentioning was. We'll see you in a bit.
Are you stuck in a dead-end routine? Feel like you're reliving the same killer day over and over? At Deja Voodoo, we specialize in helping you cut through life's repetitive cycles. Whether you need to take the plunge, pull the trigger on a big decision, or just find a way to shock yourself back into productivity, we've got you covered. Our patented Final Destination Reset method guarantees you'll wake up refreshed, even if it's in the same bed, on the same day, for the 100th time. So don't let time loop you out. Embrace the inevitable with Deja Voodoo, because sometimes the best way forward is 6 feet down. Deja Voodoo, because life's too short until it isn't.
Welcome back, folks. You're now entering the spoiler zone for Happy Death Day to You, which has earned a universal slash. And we have a lot to unpack here, but before we get into the specifics of our ratings, let's go through those kills.
You know, you gotta have a good time with a kill count like this because it allows us to see some of these characters die more than once and in a variety of different ways. And this movie is interesting. We have an official 17 on-screen deaths in this one, but an unofficial 25 if we're counting some of the deaths or kills that are mentioned in the film, but we don't actually get to see on screen. And when you have a movie where our main character kills herself almost as many times as our antagonist's kill count is, you gotta have something to talk about. So I gotta ask, which one of these kills looped you in?
Okay, I'm going to pull the Band-Aid right off. Her in a bikini jumping from a plane just to flip off the camera in front of Carter and Danielle's makeout session on the bench. Iconic.
So good.
Again, that's the petty suicide.
It's so good. You know what? I think I read Jessica Roth actually, that's her favorite kill as well in the film. And apparently that kill wasn't even in the original plans for the film. It was just like added when they were doing some reshoots.
Yeah, it just seemed like you could tell that shit wasn't intentional. I mean, first off, even the look of that scene felt really fucking off and really out of nowhere. And honestly, a little above budget. However, she did look like she was having a hilarious time filming that.
They were having a good time and we were having a good time. And that's good all around. I think my favorite kill goes to perhaps a concern of my own, and that is the MRI kill with the screwdriver. Because I've had plenty of MRIs in my life. And every time I'm doing that, they're always like, oh, you checked everything? Good, hop on in. And I'm like, what? But what if there's like a coin that I didn't notice because I never have coins, but what if I had one in my pocket and I forgot about it and it flies out and like hits me in the eyeball or something? And I'm always thinking about that. I'm like, what about the grommet on like a pair of pants or something? Like, I don't know. In reality, like it's never been an issue and I always thoroughly check all my stuff. But I love that this gave us the worst possible situation, which was being pressed against the MRI and then having an item magnetized into your chest.
Yeah.
Mac, you are so afraid of getting Final Destinationed.
I mean, once you watch some of this shit, you got to be a little paranoid.
The sounds that these machines make anyone uneasy. Okay. It's there and you're sitting in there and you're imagining something feels weird. Like something feels wrong. I don't know what it is, but and it's really just nerves because you have your head in a machine for however long. So I love that they had a play on that here because it's not a real fear. It's not like I actually, have a phobia and get really worried, but it executed well.
Yeah. I actually had a lot of fun with the tree drinking the drain cleaner in the aisle at the grocery store because it was so ridiculous. And the fact that there was the dude just walking past the aisle that happened to be looking as she was just like, oh, whatever, cheers, and starts downing this stuff, and the reaction that dude had, man, we just got to get it done. Go down an aisle, grab some poison, drink it, chug it, you're good. Off yourself. But there was to your point, Mac, when you were talking about like how some of this shit was pretty gnarly, but probably some of the most lighthearted parts of the movie, you're absolutely right, because there was like a severity aspect that was lifted from most, if not all, of these suicide kills, especially, that you just kind of had a good time with unexpectedly.
And that's all credit to Jessica Roth, because holy shit, anybody else could have really made this go sideways.
This is very true.
Yeah, it's hard to show something like this in media and not be worried about doing harm to the viewer. And I think they were able to do it here. Sure, like it's a little uncomfortable watching her make these decisions, but at the same time, they do it so fast and they make such a light time of it because they know that she's coming back. So they kind of power their way through it. So it seems kind of okay by the end of that segment. And even when she's falling and then falls right into bed, I was like, okay, that was a clean transition. I did really like that.
For sure. And all these deaths aside, I really want to pause and give some credit to this entire team effort for the seamless continuity between these two films. But damn, what a task this script supervisor must have had trying to keep continuity between literally this entire fucking movie's worth of scenes, but then also in addition to its predecessor when we're reliving the time loops from the previous film.
That was perfect. And the loop that we have at the beginning was a really nice nod to all of that as well. So I don't know who's responsible for making this kind of stuff happen. I know it's really challenging to make movies in general, because if they yell cut, you have to remember what you were doing, which way you were looking, which way your arm was, all that kind of stuff to make sure you have that continuity. That's crazy. I would not be able to remember anything like that. So like you said, Chris, hats off to them. But I just love that first scene that we get with our new character, in reality not new, but formerly a side character, stepping through his own bit of a time loop with the trash coming out of the car and all this kind of stuff. And I just want to know, do you just do all the similar scenes at the same time? Like, do you film the one getting out of the car and going that way and getting out of the car and knowing what's going on? Do you just do them back to back to back to back so they're all seamless, or do you film them out of order? I don't know.
All I know is that I'm almost certain most movies are filmed completely out of order, just doing certain scenes. And I got to imagine making a movie, acting in a movie is a completely different experience than watching the movie. You know what I mean? Because it is almost never like one straight shot. You know what I mean? It's always like, well, we're going to get some of these ending shots done way up here, or this person's only scheduled till here. So we're going to get this person in these scenes that are going to go for the whole movie, get those out of the way so we can meet that deadline and then go on with the rest of the film, you know?
It's wild to imagine how the sausage is made. And honestly, it doesn't ruin it. It just makes it more impressive, the fact that they're able to like achieve all of this. I think we've mentioned the polish that we get with this movie, though, and how it looks clean. And they did a good job with that. The whole time machine thing and the effects that we have with that, they're cool. Totally unnecessary. I think it's totally over the top for this kind of genre here, but it works. It looks fun. It looks silly. It looks like a time machine, but it also doesn't look like it has any sort of crystal needed or any sort of trash needed for fuel. And I'll give it credit for having a time machine that just looks like a machine.
Yeah, for sure. I'll tell you a couple of things that I really enjoyed about this film. I loved the fact that they had to rebuild the sets from scratch for the parts that were inside the university hospital because they couldn't use the one they used last time. So kudos to them for the extra effort with the set design there. That just is good. They could have easily been like, well, let's redesign what we're doing here and not do the hospital scenes, you know what I mean? And just go in a different direction. But they took that shit as a challenge and they made it happen. So that's a kudos to the filmmakers here. But I loved some of the visuals that we get that were the subtle nods to Back to the Future in this movie, because just like how the first film plays heavily into Groundhog Day with the legend Bill Murray, the sequel plays heavily into, Chris, you said it, Back to the Future 2. And we see that in the scene where we get the tree trimming stuff going on, and we see the logo Biff's tree removal, which is a nod obviously to Biff in Back to the Future. We also get a clock tower scene in one of the suicide attempts, or suicide successes rather, where she just falls off the clock tower building. And then we also get this moment when Tree drives into the power plant to cut off the power, and she's hitting the generator at exactly 88 miles per hour, which is another nod to Back to the Future. So you gotta love some of these nods that the movie gave us.
A lot of blink and you'll miss it moments.
Right.
And
right.
none that are very, let me hit you right over the head with it. Biff's is pretty out there. The clock tower, you would think, feels super apparent when you're discussing it, but when you're watching the movie, it's just, that could be absolutely lost on you.
It's quick.
Like, I can't think of the last time that I saw Back to the Future 2, and I only noticed those things because I heard about them or read about them after I saw this movie for the first time.
I could tell you exactly the last time I saw Back to the Future 2, and it was when I was getting the Bela Lugosi tattoo on my arm, because as I was sitting there for fucking 11 straight fucking hours, I watched all the fucking Back to the Futures. 1, 2, and 3.
We're built different because I was watching The Menu and then some other bullshit horror movies.
Not my choice. This was my tattoo guy. It was his house. He was like, hey man, I'm going to, what, you like Back to the Future? Cool, man. That's what's going on. And that's what I, who am I? Be like, let me pick.
I love that guy showed you the Back to the Future movies. Katie showed me a bunch of random movies. Again, like we watched Ginger Snaps. We've seen The Menu. We watched a bunch of other shit. But then she also showed you The Greasy Strangler.
Yeah, to be fair, when I got my tattoo with Katie, I did get introduced to The Greasy Strangler. And that is a gift that, well, it's a gift. It's a gift. We'll put it that way.
So much time travel goodness in the world. And I'm going to go back once again to the start of our film when we meet each other in the dorm. But this time, everyone kind of knows what's going on. Well, minus one. But our two loopers figure out that the other ones know what's going on and then quickly get to work to try to figure out, what do we need to do to stop this or reverse it or prevent it or whatever it is. I just love they whipped some really great one-liners back and forth. Lots of stuff going on comedy-wise. And I think that's where this movie excels, is when it has its comedy moments and its one-liners, especially between these college-age kids. Usually the writing for college-age kids is bad. And so when you have a film that's able to make them funny and humorous to somebody who's basically 40, kudos. I love that.
Yeah, there's a lot of really fun moments in this movie, and I'm just trying to think back on some of these moments that I thought were really fun. I obviously love when we get the early scene when first it's just Ryan's apparent loop, and it's the moment where he's kind of getting stalked or thinks he's getting stalked, and he's going through the rooms and the hallways or whatever, he's in the lab or whatever it is at the time, and it's suspenseful, right? And you get the fake jump scare, and then finally he gets killed and stabbed, right, by the babyface mask killer or whatever. I think it was one of the slashiest feelings that we get in this film, and I really loved that for what it was. But there's so many fun, silly moments. There's the moment where the scene where that follows the recap segment, right? The previously on Happy Death Day, where Ryan goes to Tree, and there's the moment where he feels like after he's told what's going on, where he just thinks he's still dreaming and says, "It's like Inception. A dream within a dream," and he lays down. It's just the way that was delivered was kind of a laugh out loud moment. It was really fun.
God, yeah, there are so many things in this movie that are fun. That opening scene in particular is just so fucking good. And I think about even Ryan as a character, he really shined in this movie. He really stepped it up from just being a background figure in the last film. But let me just suck the fun right out of this, because my favorite scene is the first one that made me cry. And that was her showing up to her birthday and then realizing that her mom was alive and seeing her mom for the first time. Her mom that we only really get in a photo or a memory in the previous film. Oh my gosh, what an emotional sucker punch. And it's the way that her relationship with her mom underscores this entire movie and just colors it completely differently. We think about the basketball game. She has this whole pause and reflection that the time loop was completely unrelated to her mom. And you think about her realization of it's just being Ryan and these kids' experiments. She felt so connected to her mom in the first film, only to feel disconnected and then to have the realization of what this means. And she has another opportunity to have that whole dynamic and then to realize that you're living someone else's life. And to have the chance to say goodbye to her mom, to have some borrowed memories. That whole dynamic is just terrible, but beautiful at the same time. But when we first see that scene and you see that emotion in Jessica Roth's eyes, it just really took me for a ride.
It's a tearjerker.
It's a good one, though, because it does play into the real things that real humans experience. I think anyone who's lost someone knows that you quite often dream about them, and you dream that they're talking to you or visiting you or seeing you in your modern life. And so to have this kind of a moment in a movie, you can relate to it. I think almost all of us can. And it does hit, even though it's a horror comedy, even though it's just a silly movie or whatever, they treated it well and they paused and they let us have a moment to see that she was feeling and thinking just like we would do. And that I got to appreciate them for that.
For sure. I will highlight, though, we've talked a lot about in deaths, right? Tree committing suicide in different ways, and it's like a whole montage segment of different things that are happening back to back to reset the day as we're just flash forwarding through the story to get to the climax. But I'll tell you one part of that we haven't talked about, and I love that montage, that segment, that scene, whatever you want to call it, for the very end where we see Tree falling back into bed. And I think it's very clever because the song that's playing in the background is Paramore's Hard Times. And if you've ever seen that music video, it's the lead singer, Hayley Williams, falling slowly back into bed from the roof, right? And So there's like almost like a tie or nod or callback to that song, obviously, because it's intentionally playing that song in the background. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, she's even wearing similar attire to what Tree wore in this movie. So kind of cool.
Not going to lie, I was not upset at hearing some Paramore. You know,
Right?
I'm not like the world's biggest fan. I don't know the songs or anything like that, but I do enjoy it. And I feel like it fits the
Yeah, it's fun.
I'm going to be honest, the music was totally lost on me. Which I guess is not a bad thing. This movie, the music disappeared into the movie, and it maybe accentuated enough where it didn't stand out to me. But I do know the moment that you're talking about because, wow, that looked so fucking cool.
It feels like a music video moment. You know what I mean? Just like imagine like a 3-minute music video of someone just like falling slowly back into bed.
For some reason, it also feels a little bit Evanescence, and that is probably aging.
Falling from like the rooftop or whatever that music video was, right?
Yes, that one.
I'm with you. I'm tracking.
Is now a good time to ask about the potential plot hole or maybe just my misunderstanding, because we have 2 Ryans at the start of the film. We have one tied up in our main prime dimension. We go into this other dimension. We figure it out. We make our way back. But what happened to the other Ryan? Did fixing it simply make him go back to his other dimension?
This was a big question for me.
Yeah, theoretically, they don't really explain it, and I don't think they're really asking for us to look too far into it. But I do have to imagine that he would have been sent back to his original timeline, hopefully, or at least to some other timeline.
It's just weird because he was the killer at the start of the film, and then okay, he's gone now. You fixed it, all done, no worries. It was kind of weird. I mean, it's not important, it's really not important, but at the same time, I hung on to it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, there's some multiverses, there's some multidimensions. Who fucking knows?
I think what is interesting is the machine thing that they were building, right? It was called Sisyphus, but actually it could tie to some Greek mythology if we're really looking back on it, because I believe there is a story about a dude named Sisyphus who escaped death, and as his punishment, when he gets to the afterlife, is forced to roll a boulder up a hill every day for eternity. Unfortunately for this dude, though, he was never able to get to the top of the hill because something would always cause the boulder to roll back down, where, at least in this movie, we see Tree deal with a little bit of this, but ultimately finds a way to break the cycle at some point and kind of end this loop of eternity.
It's some deep shit.
It's deep, man. We got into some history here. It was emotional, fun, time travel, sci-fi horror, man. It's like way more complex than you should be getting from a movie that's as zany as this one, man.
I'm curious where they're going to take it if they do make a third installment, because I would love for them to have the realization that this isn't her universe or isn't her reality, and that she made it to one that was almost hers, but not quite. That would be like so many episodes of sci-fi shows forever. Lots of Stargates, for instance. But yeah, that could be a fun take on things, because I just love like seeing her reactions to things and seeing how easily she can handle stuff, but still has her moments of running and screaming.
Yeah. Hey, this just stood out to me now. How does she know in that dimension she ended up in that guy that she passed by is actually gay?
True.
This could be the dimension where he's straight.
You never know. There
Maybe
are some
he's
differences.
bi.
Could be. It could be. It's wild. Although I also think there's some, and I know it's the point, but there are some dumb moments for some of these characters. And it did lead to some giggles, some laughs out loud, but there were some dumb moments. I'm thinking of Danielle specifically, right? She had some really dumb moments. There was the whole Anne Frank, Helen Keller mix up, which was absolutely fucked up, but also kind of hilarious. I'm just going to say it. And there was, who said it? The whole, I think acting blind is harder than actually
Danielle.
being blind.
Again.
It was Danielle again, man. Danielle for the win for dumbest character in a movie. Holy shit. Some glorious statements.
Danielle was on her dumb bullshit, but also good for her for figuring out a way to get those keys to them and then back in time.
It is true. She came in clutch when it mattered most, and so you got to give her credit where credit's due. But holy shit, there were some lines in this movie that were just ridiculous and off the wall.
It's great that they had a buffoon character, but I love that they made it somebody who wasn't the main character, because that's like all of TV right now. The main character is a buffoon, or their best friend's a buffoon, and they're always doing stupid things that nobody would actually do. To have it be a side character that is like comedy relief in a way, great choice. You need that comic relief, but they also still make her functional. You know, she's not just so completely buffooned that she can't get anything done. That whole thing with the professor and the horrible accent and pretending to be both blind and French, that was weird.
She said gracias at some point, man.
I just love it, how over the top it was.
Oh, that was so good. Okay. Speaking of Danielle, oh my gosh, her fucked up relationship with Carter. It begs this question. Tree and Carter, big fans of them. Really love that they get together. Love that they stay together. Really enjoy them. I have zero complaints about them. But I do have the question. She has this conversation with her mom, and I do think that she made the right decision. She can't live in the past. She has to live for her future. But does she really think Carter's the one? I mean, listen, he's fucking great. Don't get me wrong. But also, they're in college. And some people get together in college age and they last forever, and that's fantastic. But also, many people do not.
This is true. It's a valid question. It's a valid point. We don't know. The odds are against them for sure, statistically. But man, the story that they have to tell their kids or whoever down the line of how did you guys fall in love? You know, I mean, how much more romantic is it that you were stuck in a time loop together and kept waking up in bed together until finally you fell in love?
Until finally you grew on each other. That's what that sounds like, Sean. I think you could maybe describe it a little bit more. I think Happy Death Day to You.
I didn't say it as good as she said it. She said it and I was like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
But like I said it, it sounds fucking weird.
Yeah, Happy Death Day to You, I think, gives a little bit more of a sense of agency, where I would believe the romanticism in, like, she actually made this choice.
Yeah.
She didn't just stumble into this. This isn't just a natural consequence of breaking or existing in this loop. She had the moment to have her mom back, and she chose the reality where she is the person that she's been made from her grief and from her pain, but also she chose the life where she could see what happens with Carter, which is great. Listen, I love Carter. Carter's cute. Carter's like best boyfriend. But also, girl, I don't know. I just feel like maybe we could have spared the how do you know he was the one question.
However, that is pretty realistic to college age kids who make these kind of decisions all the time, thinking that they know what's best for themselves for the future.
For sure. I guess it's just that it's irrelevant if he's the one or not. Because you're making the decision for the right reasons. You're choosing your future instead of living in your past. And I get that. It's just, you know, him may or may not be the one is irrelevant.
You just never know. You never know. She did try to choose the other life first, though.
She did.
Just didn't work out.
Yeah.
And then realized through trial and tribulations that she did have to actually take the road and say goodbye to her mom, which is very, very tough.
To lose someone twice. Ooh.
They did a good job here with the other characters, though, too. Like the characters that aren't in it quite as much. I think Samar was pretty hilarious. The churros thing. I love a good churro. And so his obsession with them throughout the film was just enough to make it funny without being too much to be just boring, honestly. And Dre, also a fantastic character. Loved that as well. So I think we have a good mixture of personalities here. It's not quite as silly as like Big Bang Theory, but it's nice to have these people because we're going to see them over and over and over again. So it's cool to have some people that aren't jocks, cheerleaders, main characters, whatever. It's fun to have the nerds in play.
Yeah, it is fun to have them in play. Let me tell you what's not fun to have in play, though. And this is actually my worst part of the movie. I say this as if it's going to really ruin the experience. It fucking doesn't. It's fine. But Dr. Butler and his wife being in on the fucking murders, it's like, okay.
Ridiculous.
This is just the dimension where everything's more campy. I could have done without that.
Very soap opera.
Yeah. Just, okay, Dr. Butler, sure. Dr. Butler's wife being in on it and then getting got, come on, guys.
Tough. It's a tough sell. It really is. And, Mac, I think you actually said this earlier, but I do think that, and I don't know if you think it's the worst part, but I do think that the worst part of this movie is surprisingly the ambitious and complex storyline. I think we don't need to go through the crazy alternate universes. I don't think it was 100% necessary. I think maybe we could still play into it, but not go so in depth that we have multiple different multiverses of shit that's going on here, because I do think we departed, like I said earlier, from the fun slasher film that didn't take itself too seriously, and we dove headfirst into a much more complex and time-twisting story that's filled with those alternate universes. And I think because of that, this movie may get mixed reviews. And I think we already also mentioned that, box office-wise, didn't do as well as anticipated. And we also know that we were supposed to get another film per the director, but maybe because of that, we're not going to be able to. And so I don't know, guys, maybe the complex story did a disservice to the film overall.
I have to give it some negative marks for the end of the movie, because that's where I think it jumped the shark. I think having the complex timey-wimey stuff, I'm just so used to it with sci-fi that's like, okay, that's a given almost. But when we make it to the end and this creation, this machine is now being used by the government and we want a test subject and we're going to choose one of our friends, that I feel like was all right. This is the point where they're not going to make any more of these. As soon as I saw this happen, I was like, all right, it leaves it open, but almost too wide open. Whereas before, like coming into this film, we weren't sure how could they go back for more. And then when we see it happen, we're like, okay, there's a way, and we're going to use that way to come up with a storyline for the film. And it's actually kind of silly and fun and interesting. But the end of this bothers me because it feels like now we're too locked in. It's almost like when in one of these recent Predator movies, they decided to have a human Predator suit. And that is just a choice that you should never make. And now they can't undo it. They're just going to have to imagine that movie never happened, honestly, to move past it. And I think if you wanted a really good third part, you could probably find a way to make it work. But you have to work against the ending here. I think you have to almost undo it or ignore it in order to get a really compelling story, in my opinion.
Okay. Actually, here's what I want. And I'm going to watch this movie again. Let me just be clear. But now I want to rewatch this movie, Happy Death Day to You, and Freaky. And I want part 3 to be Happy Freaky Day.
Okay.
I want a time loop with Catherine Newton and Jessica Roth getting into hijinks.
Little crossover action.
Actually, honestly, if both of the characters from Freaky knew that they were stuck in a time loop, that could be fun.
That would be wild, for sure.
I just have a thing for blondes and jackets.
It could be fun. I do think that this movie is definitely worth a rewatch. I want to watch Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day to You back to back. I think, you don't need to with the recap and what this movie gives you if you were just wanting to settle into this one and not have to rewatch another movie first. But I also do think that they pair really well together from a storyline aspect, and I do want to test that out.
Yeah, this is one of those, kind of like you mentioned with Back to the Future, that back to back is probably a really fun experience and a good way to spend a couple hours and lets you really dive in. I think it would also feel seamless the way they were able to transition between the movies. And so it wouldn't be a jarring first movie to sequel feeling. It would be like, okay, pause and hit play. That's effectively what we're getting between the movies. So yeah, it would be worth it to watch them.
Yeah, I bet it would feel as good as watching Halloween 1978 and Halloween 2 1981 back to back. But that's neither here nor there. For now, there you have it, folks. Happy Death Day to You has earned a universal slash. We've certainly had a robust discussion here, but the conversation about this movie doesn't end here by any means.
Come check out our alternate universe by supporting the show. Visit patreon.com/hackerslash, where you can enjoy even more of the show, including bonus content with early access, extended episodes with our B-sides, movie nominations, and live shows.
And if you're into timey-wimey stuff like I am, particularly the episode of Stargate SG-1 in which the crew go back to the 1970s, caught in somewhat of a time loop, but not exactly caught. Anyway, just leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. This helps us continue to deliver great content for all you horror fiends out there.
We'll see you next time, folks. And remember, once a douchebag, always a douchebag.
Dude, did you open spam porn again on the computer?